Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you woke up without an alarm, without caffeine, without that quiet resentment toward your own life? Not on vacation, not when you were younger. I mean recently. Because if your mornings start with an alarm ripping you out of sleep like a hostage negotiation coffee before consciousness, and the lie that this is just adulthood, then congratulations, you're not busy, ambitious, or disciplined. You're exhausted and in denial. And the worst part, you're probably proud of it. We've somehow turned sleep deprivation into a personality trait. CEOs brag about it. Hustle culture worships it. Students normalize it. Parents glorify surviving it. And yet, your focus is trash. Your emotions are unstable. Your memory is unreliable. Your health is quietly declining. But instead of fixing the root problem, you slap caffeine on it and call it productivity. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one wants to hear. You're not failing because you're lazy. You're failing because your brain is running on fumes and you keep pretending that's normal. This video is not here to comfort you. It's here to expose a lie so common it feels like reality. This video is based on the book Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker, neuroscientist, sleep researcher, former Harvard professor, and current professor at UC Berkeley. And before we go any further, let's be very clear. This video falls under the Fair Use Act of YouTube. It is for educational and transformative purposes only. This is not a replacement for the book. It's a challenge to read it. Now, who is Matthew Walker really? He's not a motivational speaker. He's not a biohacker influencer. He's not selling supplements or productivity courses. He's a scientist who accidentally discovered something deeply unsettling. Sleep is not optional, and modern life is systematically destroying it. Walker didn't start his career trying to optimize humans. He started by studying dementia. What he found was terrifying. Sleep breakdown wasn't just a symptom of brain diseases like Alzheimer's, it was likely helping cause them. That discovery sent him down a path most people don't want to follow because it leads to a conclusion that completely dismantles modern culture's values. Here's the main idea of the book, stripped of politeness. If sleep were a drug, it would be the most powerful, performance-enhancing, emotion-stabilizing, life-extending substance ever discovered, and we're the first society dumb enough to deprive ourselves of it on purpose. This video will not gently suggest better sleep habits. It will confront you with what happens when you don't. And yes, that means calling out hustle culture grind worship, I'll sleep when I'm dead logic, and the quiet arrogance of thinking biology doesn't apply to you. Most high performers aren't winning because they work more. They're winning because they recover better. Sleep isn't rest. It's biological maintenance. Skip it long enough and things don't just break. They rot silently. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The forgotten third of your life. Somewhere along the way, we decided sleep was the one biological rule we were allowed to negotiate with. Not food, not oxygen, not gravity, but sleep. We turned it into something flexible, something optional, something you could catch up on later, like unpaid emails. And that decision didn't come from science. It came from convenience, from alarms that drag people out of deep sleep at unnatural hours. From artificial light that convinces the brain it's always noon, from caffeine masquerading as productivity, from economies that reward availability over health. And the book opens by calling that bluff immediately. The first uncomfortable truth laid on the table is simple. Humans are the only species arrogant enough to deprive themselves of sleep without a survival reason. Every animal sleeps. Birds sleep mid-flight. Dolphins sleep with half their brain. Even predators that would be safer awake still shut down daily. Evolution did not miss a memo. If sleep were unnecessary, it would have been deleted millions of years ago. Instead, it survived every extinction event, every environmental pressure, every efficiency test nature could throw at it. which means the modern idea that sleep is wasted time isn't ambitious, it's biologically illiterate. What's quietly dismantled here is the belief that sleep is passive, that it's just the absence of wakefulness. The book makes it clear that sleep is an active, coordinated process governed by two forces: an internal clock that tracks time independent of your behavior, and a chemical pressure that builds the longer you're awake. You don't decide when you're tired, you negotiate with chemistry and light. That's why jet lag feels like psychological sabotage. That's why night shifts age people faster. That's why scrolling at midnight doesn't relax you. It lies to your brain about what time it is. And this isn't just a US problem. Japan's karoshi culture literally coined a word for death by overwork. South Korea has had to legislate maximum work hours because sleep deprivation was hollowing out an entire generation. In Europe, countries with shorter work weeks and later school start times consistently outperform in health and productivity metrics. Meanwhile, global markets reward speed, reaction, constant availability, and quietly punish biological limits. You see it in financial centers that never sleep, logistics systems that run 24/7, and economies that treat circadian rhythms like inefficiencies. The result isn't more output, it's more burnout, more errors, more human cost hidden behind GDP numbers. Caffeine shows up here not as a villain, but as evidence. It doesn't give you energy. It blocks your awareness of exhaustion. That's a critical difference. It's the reason people feel fine while cognitively impaired. The book points out that caffeine doesn't erase sleep pressure. It delays the bill, and when it wears off, the debt hits harder. That's why crashes feel brutal. That's why insomnia often isn't a disorder, but a stimulant hangover. Entire industries run on this illusion. So do students, so do founders, so do professionals who confuse alertness with competence. What makes this section confrontational isn't the biology, it's the implication. If your sleep is broken, your decisions are broken, your emotional regulation is broken, your memory is compromised. And yet society keeps handing responsibility back to the individual while engineering environments that make real rest almost impossible. We're told to optimize sleep while drowning in light, noise, notifications, and economic anxiety. Recent inflation pressures, housing instability, and job precarity in the US haven't just affected wallets, they've shredded sleep. Financial stress is now one of the strongest predictors of insomnia worldwide. The system creates the exhaustion, then sells you solutions that never address the cause. The book isn't nostalgic about some pre-industrial golden age. It's precise. It shows how light exposure at the wrong time, irregular schedules, and cultural attitudes toward work systematically desynchronize the human brain from the planet it evolved on. Sleep didn't disappear overnight. It was eroded, politely, gradually, with good intentions and terrible consequences. The uncomfortable realization by the end is that most people aren't bad at sleeping. They're living inside structures that sabotage it, and pretending otherwise keeps the lie alive. Key idea: sleep is not a lifestyle choice. It's a biological contract modern society keeps breaking. Key takeaway: if you treat sleep as optional, your brain will eventually collect the cost in cognition, mood, and health, whether you agree or not. Favorite quote: the shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. Your brain has a night shift. What follows is where the illusion really collapses, because once you understand what sleep actually is, the idea of skipping it stops sounding impressive and starts sounding reckless. Sleep is not the brain shutting down, it's the brain switching shifts. That matters because almost everything modern life assumes about rest is wrong. The common belief is that sleep is a passive state, like powering off a device, but the reality described here is closer to a construction site that only operates at night. When consciousness steps aside, an entirely different system takes control. memory consolidation, emotional recalibration, immune tuning, metabolic regulation. None of that happens efficiently when you're awake, which means every hour you steal from sleep doesn't just disappear, it gets stolen from those systems instead. The book dismantles the myth that the brain rests during sleep by showing how active it becomes. Electrical rhythms shift, different stages cycle with precision. Deep sleep clears metabolic waste from neural tissue, literal toxins linked to neurodegenerative disease. REM sleep reconnects emotional memories without reactivating pain. This isn't philosophical, it's mechanical. Skip the process and debris accumulates. That's not poetic language, it's biological plumbing, and evolution doesn't waste energy. The reason sleep exists in every studied species is because the cost of being unconscious is outweighed by the cost of not doing this maintenance. That's why animals don't optimize it away. That's why even prey animals accept vulnerability every night. The question isn't why sleep makes us unconscious. The real question is why wakefulness is so damaging that evolution had to invent a daily repair state. What's unsettling is how modern schedules directly interfere with the timing of these processes. Sleep isn't one thing, it's a sequence. Deep sleep dominates early night hours. REM intensifies closer to morning. When people shorten sleep, they don't shorten it evenly. They amputate entire stages. That's why sleeping 6 hours instead of 8 isn't only losing 2 hours. It's losing specific brain functions, disproportionately the ones tied to learning, creativity, and emotional stability. Globally, this mismatch is becoming visible. In Europe, delayed school start times correlate with better academic performance and mental health. In contrast, countries with rigid early schedules show higher adolescent depression and anxiety. In Asia's megacities, long commutes and late-night screen exposure are reshaping sleep architecture across entire populations. This isn't cultural preference, it's circadian disruption on a mass scale. And the scariest part is how subjective perception fails here. People consistently underestimate their cognitive decline under sleep restriction. Reaction time slow, judgment degrades, emotional volatility increases, but confidence stays high. That's the trap. Sleep deprivation doesn't feel like being drunk, even though performance metrics show similar impairment, which means tired people don't just perform worse, they don't know they're performing worse. This is why industries built on constant vigilance, healthcare, transportation, finance, quietly bleed errors. Medical residents working extended shifts make more mistakes. Truck drivers with irregular sleep schedules have higher accident rates. Traders running on chronic sleep loss show increased risk-taking behavior. None of this requires malice or incompetence. It's structural impairment disguised as professionalism. The book's quiet accusation is that society is optimized for wakefulness, not intelligence. We reward visibility, responsiveness, and endurance, not clarity. And then we act surprised when decision-making collapses under pressure. The brain wasn't designed for infinite uptime. It was designed for cycles. The deeper implication is uncomfortable. You cannot outthink sleep biology. You can delay it. You can numb the signals. You can override it temporarily, but you cannot skip the work it does. And if you try, the cost doesn't show up immediately. It compounds invisibly until it doesn't. Key idea: sleep is an active neurological process essential for maintaining cognitive function, emotional balance, and long-term brain health. Key takeaway: cutting sleep doesn't make you more productive. It reallocates damage to systems you won't notice failing until it's too late. Favorite quote: "The brain is not resting during sleep. It is undergoing some of the most complex and important work it will ever do." Time, age, and the slow theft of rest. And then comes the part people take personally, because it explains something they've been quietly ashamed of for years. At some point, sleep stops obeying you. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It doesn't collapse, it thins, fragments, slips. And instead of questioning the system that caused it, most people turn the blame inward. They assume they're broken, weak, aging badly, losing discipline. But the reality laid out here is far more unsettling. Sleep changes across life in ways culture refuses to acknowledge and then punishes people for not keeping up. Children don't sleep because they're lazy or unfocused. They sleep because their brains are under construction. Deep sleep dominates early life because growth hormone is released almost exclusively during that stage. That's when tissues repair, immune systems calibrate, neural connections stabilize. Take sleep away from kids, and you don't just get crankiness, you get measurable impacts on learning, emotional regulation, and long-term health. Countries that chronically undersleep their students don't get more competitive adults. They get anxious, burned out ones. Then adolescence hits, and biology pulls a cruel trick. The internal clock shifts later. Teenagers are not wired to wake up at dawn. Their brains want darkness later into the morning. When schools ignore this, which most still do, performance drops, accidents rise, mental health suffers. This isn't theory, it's been replicated globally, and yet early start times remain because systems prioritize logistics over physiology. The message is clear: adapt or fail. Adulthood brings the next illusion that sleep loss is a badge of competence. Workplaces reward availability. Parents normalize exhaustion. Economies normalize permanent alertness. But biologically, something else is happening. Deep sleep begins to erode, not disappear, but shrink. That's the stage most responsible for memory consolidation and physical restoration. Adults don't need less sleep because they're efficient. They get less deep sleep because the brain's ability to generate it weakens with age. And this is where the fear creeps in, because deep sleep is also when the brain clears metabolic waste, the same waste implicated in Alzheimer's disease. Research cited here shows that older adults with reduced deep sleep have higher levels of amyloid buildup. Sleep loss doesn't just correlate with cognitive decline, it may accelerate it. Aging doesn't cause poor sleep alone. Poor sleep may speed aging. Globally, this intersects with modern stress in brutal ways. Aging populations in Europe and East Asia are sleeping less while carrying more economic pressure. Rising retirement ages, unstable healthcare systems, and financial anxiety don't just affect mood, they fracture sleep. Meanwhile, productivity narratives tell older adults to stay sharp without giving them the biological conditions to do so. What makes this section uncomfortable is how clearly it exposes the lie of willpower. You cannot muscle your way through biological change. Fighting altered sleep with stimulants, alcohol, or medication doesn't restore architecture. It distorts it further. That's why so many adults report sleeping enough hours but waking unrested. Quantity replaced quality, and no one noticed until the damage showed up. The quiet tragedy is that people interpret this decline as personal failure rather than a signal. Instead of protecting sleep more fiercely as they age, they sacrifice it first, exactly when the brain needs it most. Key idea: sleep is not static across life. Its structure changes, and ignoring that accelerates cognitive and emotional decline. Key takeaway: aging doesn't mean you can afford less sleep. It means you can afford sleep loss even less than before. Favorite quote: as we age, sleep becomes less efficient and the brain pays the price. The cost of staying awake. And this is where the conversation stops being abstract and starts getting uncomfortable, because now the damage stops hiding behind theory and starts showing up in real bodies, real minds, real consequences. Sleep deprivation doesn't fail loudly, it erodes quietly. It doesn't announce itself as catastrophe. It disguises itself as irritability, forgetfulness, impulsive decisions, emotional numbness, and just being stressed. That's why it spreads so easily. By the time people notice something is wrong, they've already normalized it. What's laid out here is brutal in its simplicity. The brain breaks before the body does. Memory is the first casualty. Deep sleep is when the hippocampus transfers short-term memories into long-term storage. Remove that process, and learning collapses. People don't just forget facts, they lose context, nuance, emotional detail. That's why chronic sleep loss makes people feel stupid before it makes them feel sick. Students pulling all-nighters don't gain extra study time. They sabotage the very mechanism that turns studying into knowledge. Then comes emotional regulation. Sleep loss amplifies negative emotion and mutes positive ones. The amygdala becomes hyper-reactive while the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational control, goes offline. This isn't poetic language. Brain scans show it, which explains why exhausted societies feel angrier, more polarized, more impulsive. Look globally. Rising sleep deprivation tracks alongside rising anxiety, depression, and burnout. That's not coincidence. It's neurochemistry meeting economics, and the body isn't spared, it just lags behind. Chronic sleep restriction disrupts glucose regulation, increases insulin resistance, elevates blood pressure, and inflames the cardiovascular system. The book doesn't exaggerate here. Even a single week of sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night can push a healthy adult into a pre-diabetic state. Heart disease risk rises. Cancer risk rises. Immune function collapses. The body starts aging faster because it's repairing slower. Across the world, this shows up differently but consistently. In China's tech sector, the 996 work culture has been linked to rising cardiovascular events. In Europe, shift workers show higher rates of metabolic disease. In the US, long work hours combined with economic insecurity have created a perfect storm of sleep loss and chronic illness. Healthcare costs balloon while prevention remains ignored. We treat symptoms because fixing sleep would require changing systems. What makes this section infuriating is how normalized all of this is. Pilots, doctors, truck drivers, emergency responders, people responsible for lives are routinely sleep deprived, and it's treated as professionalism. But the data doesn't care about narratives. Reaction time under sleep deprivation rivals intoxication, judgment becomes erratic, risk-taking increases, and yet we still trust exhausted people with enormous responsibility because that's how it's always been. The most damning insight here is that recovery is not instant. You don't undo chronic sleep debt with one long weekend. Some damage takes weeks to reverse. Some patterns never fully reset, which means the idea of pushing through now and resting later isn't ambition, it's deferred harm. This isn't a warning meant to scare. It's a correction meant to wake people up. Sleep deprivation doesn't just shorten life, it shrinks it, cognitively, emotionally, physically, long before it ends. Key idea: sleep deprivation systematically dismantles the brain first, then the body, while convincing you nothing is wrong. Key takeaway: if you sacrifice sleep for productivity, you don't gain time. You trade clarity, health, and long-term function for short-term illusion. Favorite quote: the number of people who can survive on 6 hours of sleep without impairment is 0. When the mind turns inward. The story takes a turn most people weren't expecting, because after all the damage, all the erosion, all the cost of staying awake too long, the brain reveals something almost unsettling in its generosity. Even after everything we do to sabotage it, the mind still tries to heal itself at night. Dreaming isn't a glitch. It isn't meaningless noise. It isn't some leftover evolutionary junk we haven't deleted yet. It's the brain putting you into a controlled state of altered reality on purpose. A temporary psychosis, carefully regulated, where the rules of logic loosen just enough for something else to happen. During REM sleep, the emotional centers of the brain light up while the rational brakes are dialed down. Stress chemicals like noradrenaline are almost completely shut off. That detail matters. It means the brain can revisit painful memories without reactivating the same emotional charge. You remember the event, but the sting is reduced. Trauma without terror. Memory without panic. That's why people feel lighter after good sleep. Not happier, clearer. It's why unresolved emotional experiences feel less sharp over time if sleep is intact. And it's why chronic insomnia is so tightly linked to anxiety disorders, PTSD, and depression. Take away dreaming, and emotional wounds don't scar over, they stay open. What's disturbing is how often this process is disrupted globally. War zones, economic collapse, constant uncertainty. Populations under prolonged stress don't just suffer during the day, their nights fracture too. Refugee studies show elevated REM disruption long after physical danger ends. The body escapes first, the mind lags behind, and yet dreams are routinely dismissed as nonsense. We treat them as entertainment, symbolism, superstition. Meanwhile, the brain is running one of the most sophisticated emotional regulation programs it has. You don't dream to escape reality. You dream so reality becomes tolerable again. The book makes an uncomfortable comparison. Dreaming shares features with temporary insanity. Hallucinations, delusions, time distortion, emotional intensity. But unlike psychosis, it's safe because it's temporary, contained, and happens while the body is paralyzed. Nature figured out how to let the brain go off script without letting it self-destruct. Modern life interferes with this brutally. Alcohol suppresses REM. Many sleeping pills suppress REM. Late night screen exposure delays REM. Stress fragments REM. So people technically sleep, but emotionally never reset. They wake up with yesterday's weight still attached. Then they wonder why everything feels heavier over time. You can see this culturally. Burnout doesn't come from working hard alone. It comes from working hard without emotional processing. That's why societies under constant performance pressure feel brittle, less resilient, more reactive, less forgiving. The collective nervous system never gets a chance to cool down. What's quietly hopeful here is that the brain hasn't given up. Even in damaged sleep, it tries. Even under stress, it pushes for REM. Even after trauma, it attempts to rewrite the emotional story. But it needs time, darkness, and consistency, the very things modern life withholds. Dreams aren't telling you the future, they're trying to repair the past. Key idea: dreaming is the brain's overnight emotional therapy, allowing painful memories to be processed without pain. Key takeaway: if you cut REM sleep, you don't just lose dreams, you lose emotional recovery, and stress begins to compound instead of resolve. Favorite quote: dream sleep is emotional first aid. The hidden intelligence of dreams. And just when you think the brain's nightly job description ends with emotional cleanup, it pulls something even more unsettling out of its pocket. Creation. Not productivity hack creation. Not 5 ideas before breakfast. Nonsense. Real creativity. The kind that doesn't show up on demand, doesn't respect deadlines, and absolutely refuses to be bullied by caffeine. While you're asleep, especially in REM, the brain stops playing by the rules you worship during the day. Logical boundaries loosen. Associations that would never meet in waking life collide freely. Memory networks cross-wire in ways that feel chaotic but are anything but random. This is where insight lives, not in effort, but in release. That's why breakthroughs so often arrive after rest, not during grind. Musical phrases, scientific insights, artistic leaps, even technical solutions. History is littered with examples of ideas born in dreams or just after waking, from scientific discoveries to creative works. Not because these people were magical, but because they let their brains finish the job uninterrupted. The book makes it clear that REM sleep excels at one thing the waking mind is terrible at: remote association. During the day, your brain is optimized for precision and focus. At night, it's optimized for connection. It links old information with new experience, strips away rigid categories, and recombines ideas without asking permission. That's why sleep-deprived people don't just feel tired, they become cognitively rigid, less imaginative, less flexible, less capable of seeing alternatives. Globally, this shows up in strange ways. Cultures that glorify relentless work often complain about a lack of innovation. Meanwhile, regions that protect rest consistently outperform in creativity-driven industries. This isn't moral superiority, it's biology. You cannot outwork a nervous system that requires downtime to think laterally. And here's the part people don't like hearing. You cannot force creativity while awake. You can only prepare for it. You feed the brain raw material during the day, reading, learning, observing, and then you shut up long enough at night for it to assemble something new. Skip that step, and all you get is repetition disguised as originality. There's also a darker edge here. Suppress REM long enough and creativity doesn't just decline, mental health follows it down. The same neural flexibility that enables insight also supports emotional resilience. When people lose the ability to dream deeply, they don't just lose imagination, they lose adaptability. And in a rapidly changing world, rigidity is a liability. Lucid dreaming experiments hint at something even stranger. The sleeping mind can sometimes be guided, nudged, trained, not controlled like a machine, but influenced, which raises an uncomfortable question modern life avoids entirely. What if the most powerful thinking you'll ever do happens when you're unconscious? The tragedy is how casually we sabotage this. Late night scrolling, alcohol, stress, artificial light, early alarms. We strip the brain of the very conditions it needs to innovate, then complain about feeling uninspired. That's not a mystery, that's self-inflicted. Dreams aren't escapism, they're the brain's research and development department. Key idea: REM sleep enables creative problem solving by breaking rigid thinking patterns and forming novel connections the waking mind cannot. Key takeaway: if you want better ideas, stop demanding them while awake and start protecting the conditions that allow them to form. Favorite quote: dreaming is the workshop of human creativity. The war against sleep. And, at some point, it stops being accidental. What you start seeing here isn't a collection of bad habits or unfortunate coincidences. It's a coordinated mess. A slow, global experiment where modern life systematically trains people to destroy the very biological process, keeping them sane, healthy, and functional, then sells them fixes that make it worse. Sleep disorders didn't explode because humans suddenly became fragile. They exploded because environments became hostile. Noise, light, schedules, stress, screens, artificial urgency, all normalized. The book doesn't treat insomnia as a personal failure. It treats it as a predictable response to an unnatural world. When the brain is constantly stimulated, threatened, or interrupted, it doesn't relax on command. It stays alert. That's not weakness, that's survival. And yet, the solution we reach for first is chemical silence. Sleeping pills don't recreate sleep, they sedate. They knock out consciousness without restoring natural sleep architecture. Deep sleep and REM are often reduced. Memory consolidation suffers. Emotional processing is blunted. Long-term use increases tolerance, dependence, and in some cases mortality risk. This isn't controversial science, it's well documented, but pills are convenient, they fit productivity culture. Therapy takes time, environment change takes effort. Pills let the system continue untouched. Globally, the pattern repeats. In Japan, extreme work hours correlate with rising sleep medication use. In Europe, urban noise pollution is linked to chronic insomnia rates. In developing megacities, artificial light exposure has shattered circadian rhythms entirely. People aren't broken, their nights are. Technology plays a starring role. Phones in beds, notifications after midnight, blue light suppressing melatonin while algorithms farm attention. People say they can't switch off, as if the brain is malfunctioning, while bathing it in stimulation designed to hijack dopamine. That's not insomnia, that's interference. Even well-meaning fixes backfire. Alcohol to fall asleep fragments, RM. Late-night exercise delays sleep onset. Catch-up sleep on weekends destabilizes circadian timing. The culture teaches people to treat sleep like a bank account instead of a rhythm. You can't negotiate with biology. You align or you pay. And then there's the quiet stuff nobody wants to talk about. Noise, sirens, traffic, thin walls, shift work, economic pressure forcing irregular hours, parents sacrificing sleep to survive. This isn't lifestyle optimization, it's structural, which is why blaming individuals misses the point entirely. What's chilling is how normalized all of this has become. Being exhausted is treated as proof of effort. Being unreachable at night feels irresponsible. Rest is framed as indulgence. Meanwhile, rates of anxiety, depression, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic disorders rise in lockstep with sleep loss. That's not correlation hunting, that's cause playing out in slow motion. The book makes a blunt point. Treating sleep disorders without addressing the environment that causes them is like bailing water from a leaking ship without fixing the hole. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia works better than pills long-term because it restores trust between brain and night. It removes fear. It re-establishes rhythm. It doesn't force sleep. It allows it. And here's the uncomfortable truth running underneath all of this. A society that keeps people exhausted is easier to manage. Tired minds are less reflective, less creative, less resistant. Sleep deprivation dulls dissent as effectively as it dulls memory. Whether intentional or not, the outcome is the same. This isn't about sleeping more to be better workers. It's about sleeping enough to remain human. Key idea. Modern life systematically sabotages sleep through environment, technology, and culture, then masks the damage with short-term fixes that worsen long-term outcomes. Key takeaway. You don't fix sleep by forcing unconsciousness. You fix it by removing what keeps the brain on edge. Favorite quote, sleeping pills do not create natural sleep. They create sedation. Reclaiming the night. At the end of all this, the question isn't whether sleep matters. That argument is already over. The real question is whether society is willing to change anything meaningful once the evidence becomes inconvenient. Because what emerges here isn't a self-help ending. It's a systems problem with individual consequences. Fixing sleep means challenging how work is scheduled, how schools are timed, how cities are lit, how technology is designed, and how productivity is measured. That's why sleep has been framed as a personal responsibility instead of a public health issue. It's easier to sell blackout curtains than to rethink economic incentives. The book doesn't romanticize solutions. It makes a brutal distinction between approaches that cooperate with biology and those that try to override it. Pills dominate because they promise speed. Therapy works because it restores alignment. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia doesn't add anything artificial. It removes fear, pressure, and habits that train the brain to associate night with threat. When people stop trying to force sleep, sleep returns. That irony alone should bother everyone. And yet, the wider fixes sit outside the bedroom. School start times still clash with adolescent circadian rhythms across much of the world, despite overwhelming evidence that later starts improve academic performance, mental health, and safety. Shift workers continue to be treated as expendable, even though long-term circadian disruption raises cancer and cardiovascular risk. Urban planning prioritizes brightness and noise over darkness and quiet. None of this is accidental. It's design, rewarded economically. Look globally, and the contrast becomes obvious. Cultures that protect evening darkness, social downtime, and consistent schedules see better sleep without apps, trackers, or supplements. Meanwhile, hyper-connected societies chase optimization while burning out. Even corporations quietly admit the cost. Major firms experimenting with flexible hours and meeting-free mornings report fewer sick days and higher retention. Not because workers became tougher, because they became rested. What's unsettling is how radical sleep reform sounds, even though it's biologically conservative. Humans evolved for darkness, consistency, and rest. Everything else is the experiment. Blue light after the sunset, 24-hour commerce, permanent availability. None of it has been tested across generations. We're running the trial on ourselves. This is where the narrative turns quietly defiant. Choosing sleep stops being a wellness trend and starts looking like resistance. Going offline at night isn't laziness, it's boundary setting. Rejecting constant availability isn't unambition, it's self-preservation. Designing life around biology instead of optics becomes an act of clarity in a culture addicted to performance. The book's final stance is almost uncomfortably simple. Sleep doesn't need to be enhanced, it needs to be allowed. Once environments stop interfering, the brain does the rest. That's not mystical, it's mechanical. And maybe that's the most confrontational idea of all, that the solution was never more effort, more discipline, or more hacks, just less interference from a system that benefits when you're tired. Key idea. Sleep improves not when you add interventions, but when society removes the forces that disrupt biology. Key takeaway. Reclaiming sleep isn't about optimization, it's about refusing to live at odds with human design. Favorite quote, "The best bridge between despair and hope is a good night's sleep." Conclusion. So here's where everything collapses into one uncomfortable truth. This entire book wasn't about sleep. Not really. Sleep was just a thread that exposed how casually modern life breaks human beings and then gaslights them into thinking it's a personal failure. Across every section, the same pattern keeps showing up. We built systems that reward exhaustion, we normalized dysfunction, and then we sold fixes for the damage we caused. Coffee to override biology, pills to knock you out, hustle culture to justify it, screens to distract you from the consequences. And when your body finally protests, we call it weakness instead of wisdom. What ties all of this together is control, or more accurately, the illusion of it. You don't control sleep by forcing it, you lose it the moment you try, and that mirrors everything else in modern life. Productivity, creativity, emotional stability, memory, health, all of it collapses when you live in constant override. The book keeps hammering the same quiet heresy. Alignment beats effort, biology always wins, and the bill always comes due. Think about how absurd this is. We accept that a phone needs charging, we accept that a car needs fuel, but somehow, when the brain demands rest, we call it laziness. We praise people for running on 4 hours the same way we praise gamblers who haven't lost yet. And then we act shocked when anxiety spikes, depression explodes, mistakes multiply, and entire economies wobble under burned out decision makers. This isn't just personal, it's structural. Schools fighting adolescent biology, workplaces rewarding sleep deprivation, cities designed to never go dark, algorithms trained to steal attention at night when defenses are lowest. The problem isn't that people don't know sleep matters. The problem is that everything profitable depends on you ignoring it. And that's why the ending lands where it does. Sleep becomes more than recovery. It becomes refusal. Refusal to live permanently overstimulated. Refusal to trade long-term health for short-term optics. Refusal to participate in a system that measures worth by output while quietly draining the engine. The most dangerous idea in this book is also the simplest. You don't need to become more optimized. You need to stop being interfered with. When sleep returns, everything else recalibrates. Emotions stabilize, memory sharpens, creativity reappears, decision-making improves. Even morality strengthens because tired brains make worse choices. That's not philosophy, that's neuroscience. And here's the part people don't like hearing. If you fix your sleep, you become harder to manipulate. Tired people buy more, scroll more, panic more, comply more. Rested people think. Rested people question. Rested people don't confuse urgency with importance. That's why this book matters. Not because it teaches you how to sleep, but because it exposes how deeply unnatural the modern default has become. So if this hit a nerve, good. It was supposed to. Buy the book. Read it slowly. Not as self-help, but as a manual for undoing damage you didn't choose. Because once you see how much of your life is shaped by exhaustion, you can't unsee it. And maybe that's the real ending. Not a tip, not a hack. Just a reminder you'll carry with you the next time you're told to push through, stay up, grind harder, answer one more email, sacrifice one more night. Nothing you're chasing works properly without sleep. And the bravest thing you can do in a world addicted to exhaustion is close your eyes and reclaim the night.